Hello, my name is Diana Karamakoska, and in this week's video, we're going to look at different types of communication methods. Communication is the transference and understanding of meaning, and we do this on a regular basis through various means. We all communicate differently. This can be done through verbal, written, non-verbal means, where we look at body language and behavior, and also through online forms of communication, like Facebook chat, text messaging, and email. There are different types of communication, as I've just listed. Verbal communication is the predominant means of communicating. But we also look at non-verbal behavior as well. This can range from our body language, facial expressions, whether intended or not, having through written forms like reading a script, or even through imagery or visual feedback. There's also sign language that we need to be considerate of, gestures and touches with our hands and the hand movements, which can also be quite expressive. When we look at interpersonal communication, we're referring to the communication between ourselves and other people. So we need to consider how other group members transfer meaning between and amongst each other. These can be through verbal, written, or non-verbal means of communication. And I will go through these now to talk more in detail about them. When we look at verbal communication, it is the predominant means to conveying a message. The advantages to verbal communications are that messages can be conveyed with a response received in a minimal amount of time. So it's quick and quite easy. If the receiver is unsure of the message, rapid feedback allows for early detection by the sender and enables clarification between the two. Simply asking enables the sender to rephrase the message or assist in the receiver understanding, as well as having the sender asking the receiver to reiterate that provided message to ensure of the understanding. The disadvantage to verbal communication, though, is that when we're working in an organization with multiple groups or individuals, there's a high chance that messages will need to be passed along through a number of people. In doing so, the potential for distortion increases with the number of people involved in relaying the message. By the time the message does reach the receiver, its content could be very different from the original, much like the game Chinese Whispers. When we look at written communication, it is the transmission of written words through various means like memos, letters, instant messaging, emails, or even newsletters. The advantages to these are that it's very tangible and verifiable. They give a record of the communication that can be stored for an indefinite amount of time, making it physically available for later reference. You're usually more careful with written than verbal messages, as you're forced to think about them more thoroughly about what you want to convey in a written message. Hence, it becomes more logical, clear, and well thought out. The disadvantage is that it is quite time-consuming. You want to convey the right information to your reader, which doesn't leave the option to having feedback like verbal communication does. Written messages might not also be received, and there's no assurance of that. For example, you might end up mailing or emailing to an irregular or old address. And even if the message is received, there's still no guarantee that the receiver understands or interprets the content according to its original intent. Now, when we look at the next form of communication, non-verbal behavior, every time we verbally send a message, we impart a non-verbal message, and this is done so through our body's language. Two key messages are conveyed with non-verbal behavior. the extent to which we like an individual and have interest in what they're saying, and the relative perceived status between a sender and a receiver. The advantages are that nonverbal communication does enhance our meaning of our message. Our behaviour, every body movement has a meaning to it. And rarely are these produced consciously. We act out our states of being with nonverbal body language. For example, the image that we have here of President Barack Obama with his arms crossed, looking quite thoughtful and maybe disagreeingly altogether with what this individual is saying to him. Our body language does enhance what we are saying verbally when the message we are conveying is in line with our body's language. And this leads us into the disadvantage to it. It can complicate the message. Sometimes conflicting messages can be sent or received because of conflicting verbal and nonverbal communication. For example, verbally, we may be indicating that we're okay and that we're fine, but non-verbally, our posture shows that we're quite tilted with our arms crossed. Our head is hanging down and we're not making eye contact with that individual. Therefore, it's really important that you consider both the spoken and non-verbal content of every message, especially when you're sitting down with a client or a patient for the first time. All three of these forms of communication must be considered when you are conducting interviews, checkups, as well as relaying important information to your superiors, team members, and the clients and patients themselves.